He made a promise in kindergarten, and 20 years later, he kept it. But neither of them knew how much pain and fate would stand in their way. Stay till the end, you won't believe how this love story unfolds. The playground was filled with the laughter of children, the soft crunch of tiny sneakers against the sand, and the distant chatter of teachers keeping a watchful eye. It was just another ordinary day at Maplewood Kindergarten, where the biggest worries were snack time and who got to use the red swing first. But for 5-year-old Jasper Wolf, this day was different. Jasper was a boy with messy brown hair and a fearless grin, the kind of kid who climbed the highest parts of the jungle gym and never backed down from a dare. But there was one thing he always did: he looked after Livia Salt. Livia, or Liv, as everyone called her, was smaller than most of the other kids. She had big hazel eyes that always seemed to be searching for something: comfort, reassurance, or maybe just a little bit of safety. She wasn't loud like the other kids, and she didn't run to be the first in line. She always waited, always watched. That day, Jasper found her sitting alone in the sandbox, carefully building a tiny castle with her hands. The other kids were running around, too distracted by their games to notice her. But Jasper noticed. He always noticed. He plopped down beside her, watching as she gently patted the sand to make a perfect little tower. "That looks cool," Jasper said, shoving his hands into the sand. Liv smiled a little but didn't say anything. She never talked much. Jasper hesitated for a second, then said, "You want to know a secret?" Liv looked up at him, her eyes curious. "I'm gonna marry you when we grow up," he said, his voice full of certainty, as if it were the simplest truth in the world. Liv blinked, then let out a small giggle. "Really?" "Yeah," Jasper nodded. "I'll take care of you forever. That's what husbands do." Liv tilted her head, considering this. "But what if you forget?" Jasper frowned, as if the idea was ridiculous. He reached down, grabbed a small pebble from the sand, and pressed it into her tiny palm. "There," he said. "Now you won't forget either. That's our promise rock." Liv curled her fingers around the pebble, looking at it as if it were something magical. For the rest of recess, they built the sandcastle together. And when the teacher called them inside, Liv slipped the tiny rock into her pocket, holding onto it like a secret. Neither of them knew that life had a way of testing promises. Neither of them knew how much would change. But for that one moment, under the warm afternoon sun, a 5-year-old boy and a 5-year-old girl made a promise that neither of them would ever truly forget. The years passed like pages turning in a book, slowly at first, then all at once. The playgrounds of childhood faded into the crowded hallways of high school, where life became more complicated, friendships were tested, and promises made in the innocence of childhood were often forgotten. Jasper Wolf had grown into the kind of guy everyone noticed. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with an easy confidence. His life was filled with Friday night football games, parties, and a future that looked as bright as the stadium lights shining down on him. He had a scholarship lined up, a group of friends who always had his back, and a charm that made people gravitate toward him. Livia Salt, on the other hand, had mastered the art of disappearing. By the time she was 17, she had learned how to walk the hallways like a shadow, silent, unnoticed, slipping between crowds without making a sound. She didn't want to be noticed. Because attention, in her world, usually meant trouble. At home, trouble came in the form of her mother's drunken rage or her stepfather's cruel, calculating gaze. Their house, a run-down place on the outskirts of town, was filled with slamming doors, shouting voices, and the ever-present weight of fear pressing against her chest. She spent most nights curled up in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if there would ever be a way out. But no one at school knew any of that. They only saw a quiet girl with long brown hair, always dressed in clothes a little too big, always keeping to herself. They didn't know that she never ate lunch because there wasn't enough food at home. They didn't know that her backpack carried everything she owned because she was never sure if she'd have to leave in a hurry. And they didn't know that she still kept a tiny, smooth pebble hidden in the pocket of her worn-out jacket. Jasper hadn't spoken to her in years. Not because he didn't care, he just hadn't thought about it. Life had pulled them in different directions. She wasn't part of his world anymore. Or maybe, he wasn't part of hers. But one evening, as he was leaving football practice, he saw her. She was sitting alone at the bus stop, her arms wrapped around herself, as if trying to make herself smaller. Her sleeves were too long, but when she pushed them up slightly, he caught a glimpse of something dark on her wrist. A bruise. Something inside him twisted. Without thinking, he walked over and sat down next to her. "Liv?" His voice was softer than usual. She flinched slightly but didn't look at him. "Hey, Jasper." The way she said his name, it was distant, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to say it anymore. He studied her for a moment, noticing the shadows under her eyes, the way her fingers gripped the fabric of her sweater like it was the only thing holding her together. "What happened to your arm?" he asked. Livia stiffened, then quickly pulled her sleeve down. "Nothing. Just bumped into something." Jasper wasn't stupid. "Liv, I have to go." She stood up just as the bus pulled in, stepping onto it without another word. She didn't look back. Jasper sat there, watching the bus disappear down the street. For the first time in years, he remembered the promise he had made in that old kindergarten sandbox. And for the first time, he wondered if it was too late to keep it. Jasper couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He wasn't the kind of guy to obsess over things. He had a life, a routine, and a future that seemed all but mapped out for him. But that night, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, all he could think about was the way Livia had looked at him. Not like a friend. Not like someone happy to see him after all these years. Like someone who was afraid. The next few days, he found himself unconsciously searching for her in the crowded hallways of the school, in the cafeteria, even near the bus stop where he had last seen her. But she wasn't there. It was as if she had vanished. At first, he told himself he was overthinking it. Maybe she was sick. Maybe she just didn't want to see him. Maybe it wasn't his problem. But on the third day of her absence, he heard two girls whispering by their lockers. "Did you hear? Livia Salt ran away." Jasper froze. "What do you mean, ran away?" he interrupted, his voice sharper than he intended. The girls jumped, startled by his sudden presence. One of them, a blonde named Erica, shifted uncomfortably. "I don't know. Someone said her stepdad told the police she took off. Just, left in the middle of the night or something." Jasper felt his stomach twist. "And no one's looking for her?" The girls exchanged glances before Erica shrugged. She never really had friends here. Who would? Jasper clenched his jaw and turned away, his hands balling into fists. Something about it didn't sit right. People didn't just disappear like that. And even if they did, someone should have cared. He told himself he wasn't going to get involved. He had a football game that weekend, a college scout coming to watch, and finals coming up. He had a future waiting for him. But that night, as he lay in bed, all he could think about was a little girl sitting in a sandbox, holding a tiny pebble in her hands. And the promise he had made. The next day, he drove to the house on the outskirts of town. It looked worse than he remembered, paint peeling, an old car rusting in the driveway, the kind of place where bad things happened behind closed doors. He sat there in his truck, gripping the steering wheel, debating whether he was making a mistake. Then, the front door opened. A man stepped out, tall, broad, with a rough face and mean eyes. Livia's stepfather. Jasper's hands tightened. He watched as the man lit a cigarette, took a long drag, and then turned his gaze toward Jasper's truck. For a moment, they locked eyes. Something about the way the man smirked made Jasper's blood run cold. He knew. He knew Livia wasn't coming back. Jasper didn't wait. He put the truck in reverse and drove off, his heart pounding. Livia Salt hadn't run away. Something had happened to her. And Jasper wasn't going to stop until he found out what. Jasper couldn't let it go. For days, he tried to push it to the back of his mind, to focus on practice, on school, on the life that was right in front of him. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw Livia's face. The bruises on her wrist. The way she had disappeared like a ghost, as if she had never existed at all. Something had happened to her. And no one cared. No one except him. So, one evening, after making sure his parents were distracted, he got in his truck and drove back toward Livia's neighborhood. This time, he didn't stop at her house. Instead, he pulled up near the old gas station at the edge of town, where the cashier, a guy named Vic, had a reputation for knowing everything that happened on these streets. Jasper walked inside, the scent of stale coffee and gasoline hitting him instantly. Vic was behind the counter, flipping through a magazine, barely looking up. "Yo, Wolf," Vic muttered. "What brings you here? Thought you only came around for Gatorades after practice." Jasper leaned against the counter. "I'm looking for someone." Vic sighed, putting the magazine down. "Aren't we all? Livia Salt." At that, Vic's expression changed. He glanced around, as if making sure no one else was listening. "Why the hell are you asking about her?" Jasper's pulse quickened. "Because she's missing, and no one's doing anything about it." Vic hesitated before scratching at his chin. "Look, man. I don't know much, but I know she didn't run away." Jasper felt his stomach drop. "What do you mean?" Vic exhaled slowly. "She came in here a couple weeks ago. Late at night. Looked like she'd been crying. She asked me if I knew anyone heading to Oklahoma City, said she needed to get the hell out of here. I told her I'd ask around, but next thing I know, poof. She's gone." Next day, her stepdad comes in, buys a pack of smokes, and looks way too damn relaxed for a guy whose stepdaughter just ran away. Jasper's fists clenched. Vic studied him for a moment before leaning in. "If I were you, man, I'd stop looking. Some people ain't meant to be found." Jasper ignored him. He left the gas station with 1,000 thoughts racing through his head. Livia had been trying to leave. She had been desperate to escape. But something, or someone, had stopped her. And Jasper had a sick feeling he knew exactly who. He wasn't going to let it go. So that night, long after the town had gone to sleep, he did something reckless. He went back to Livia's house. The street was quiet, the only sound the faint buzzing of a street lamp. Her stepfather's truck was parked in the driveway, the windows dark. Jasper killed the engine and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. This was stupid. He knew it was stupid. But then he saw something. The light in the back of the house was on. And for just a second, he swore he saw a shadow move behind the curtain. His heart pounded. Could she still be there? Before he could talk himself out of it, he got out of the truck and moved toward the side of the house. The grass was overgrown, and as he crept toward the back, his pulse roared in his ears. Then he heard it. A faint sound. A shuffle. A breath. And then, a whisper. "Jasper." He froze. It was her. Livia. She was still here. And she needed his help. Jasper's breath caught in his throat. For a second, he thought he had imagined it. Maybe the wind had played tricks on him, maybe the guilt in his chest had made him hear her name where there was only silence. But then. "Jasper," the whisper came again, hoarse and desperate. He turned sharply, his eyes scanning the darkened backyard. The light from the back window barely illuminated the overgrown grass, the broken-down shed in the corner, the rusty fence that hadn't been fixed in years. His pulse thundered. "Livia," he whispered, stepping forward. And then, there she was. She was crouched near the shed, half hidden in the shadows. Her long brown hair was tangled, her face pale, her lips dry and cracked. She looked thinner than he remembered, like she hadn't eaten in days. But it was her eyes that broke him the most. They were wide with fear, darting toward the house as if she expected someone to come storming out at any second. Jasper knelt beside her. "Liv, what the hell?" "Shoo," she hissed, gripping his wrist. Her fingers were ice cold. "He's inside. He'll hear you." Jasper swallowed the anger that burned in his throat. He knew exactly who she meant. Her stepfather. "Liv, we have to get you out of here," he whispered. She shook her head violently, pulling away. "I can't. He'll find me. He always does." Jasper felt something sharp twist in his gut. He had never seen her like this before, so raw, so terrified. He thought back to all the times he had passed her in the hallways, oblivious to what was really happening. "I won't let him," Jasper said, his voice low but firm. "But we have to go now." She hesitated, glancing back at the house. The light from the kitchen flickered as a shadow moved inside. Jasper tensed. Time was running out. Without thinking, he reached for her hand. "Trust me, Liv. Please." For a moment, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she nodded. Jasper pulled her up gently, wrapping an arm around her as she stumbled. She was weak, too weak, but she forced herself to keep going. He guided her through the backyard, keeping low, his heart hammering. Every step felt like an eternity. They were almost at the fence when the screen door creaked open. "Where the hell do you think you're going?" Jasper's blood ran cold. Livia's stepfather stood in the doorway, his figure silhouetted against the dim light from inside. A cigarette dangled from his fingers, the ember glowing in the dark. His face twisted into a smirk, but his eyes were filled with something far worse. Jasper moved in front of Livia instinctively. "She's leaving." The man took a slow step forward, his gaze flicking to Livia. "That right, sweetheart? You finally got the guts to run." Livia's fingers dug into Jasper's arm. He could feel her shaking. "You lay one hand on her," Jasper growled, his fists clenching, "and I swear." The man laughed, a low, cruel sound. "You think you can take her? That's cute." Jasper didn't wait for him to make the first move. He grabbed Livia's hand and bolted. "Run," he yelled, and she did. They crashed through the overgrown grass, Jasper practically dragging her toward his truck. Behind them, the man's furious shout rang out, followed by the slamming of a door. Jasper didn't dare look back. He yanked open the passenger door and shoved Livia inside. "Lock it and stay down." As soon as she did, he sprinted around to the driver's side. The second he was inside, he jammed the key into the ignition, his hands shaking as the truck roared to life. Something slammed against the side of the vehicle. Jasper didn't think. He threw it into reverse, tires screeching against the pavement as he backed out. A dark figure lunged toward the truck, but Jasper hit the gas, speeding down the street before the bastard could reach them. Livia was curled up in the passenger seat, her hands gripping the fabric of her hoodie so tightly her knuckles were white. Jasper's hands were shaking as he drove. His pulse was still pounding, but he forced himself to keep his focus. They weren't safe yet. But at least now, Livia was free. Jasper drove fast. Too fast. The truck roared down the empty streets, the speedometer climbing as he put as much distance between them and that house as possible. His grip on the steering wheel was tight, his knuckles white. Beside him, Livia sat curled up in the passenger seat, her body trembling despite the warm air blasting from the vents. She was gripping the seatbelt like it was the only thing keeping her grounded, her breathing shallow, her eyes staring straight ahead but seeing nothing. Neither of them spoke. Jasper stole a glance at her, his chest tightening at the sight. The girl who used to laugh with him in the sandbox, who once believed in promises and kindness, was now a ghost of herself. His fingers tightened around the wheel. He should have done something sooner. "Liv," he finally said, his voice quieter than he meant it to be. She didn't look at him. "Livia," he tried again. This time, she blinked and turned her head slightly, her hazel eyes filled with something fragile, something raw. "You're safe now," he said, not sure if that was the truth, but needing her to believe it. She let out a shaky breath, her fingers loosening their grip on the seatbelt. "Where are we going?" Jasper hadn't thought that far ahead. He had just known he needed to get her away. But now, reality was sinking in. "You can't go back," he said. She swallowed hard. "I know." Silence stretched between them again. The road was dark, the headlights cutting through the night, but there was nowhere to go. Nowhere she belonged. He thought of his house, his parents, who were good people, who would ask questions. Too many questions. Livia didn't need that right now. Then he thought of someone else. His older sister, Rowan. She lived an hour outside town, in a small apartment near the college she attended. She had always been the rebel, the one who took in stray animals, the one who once told Jasper, "If you ever need help and can't ask Mom and Dad, you call me first." He pulled out his phone and dialed. It rang twice before a groggy voice answered. "Jasper. It's 1 a.m. What the hell?" "I need your help," he said, cutting straight to the point. "It's Livia. She needs a place to stay." There was a pause. Then, Rowan's voice turned serious. "Are you in trouble?" Jasper glanced at Livia, who had her arms wrapped around herself, staring out the window. "Not yet. But I need to get her somewhere safe." Rowan didn't ask any more questions. "Come over." Jasper exhaled in relief. "Thanks, Ro. Just get here in one piece," she muttered before hanging up. He turned to Livia. "I have a place. My sister's." Livia blinked. "She won't mind." Jasper shook his head. "She's good people. You'll be safe with her." Livia hesitated before nodding. "Okay." Jasper pressed the gas, driving towards something that felt like hope. An hour later, they pulled up to a small apartment complex on the outskirts of a college town. The lights in Rowan's apartment were on. Jasper parked and turned to Livia. "We're here." She unbuckled her seatbelt slowly, her hands still shaking. When she reached for the door handle, she hesitated. Jasper waited, giving her time. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you." He swallowed hard. "I meant what I said, Liv. I'm not gonna let anything happen to you." She gave him a look, one he couldn't quite place, before nodding and stepping out of the truck. Jasper followed, leading her up the steps. Before he could knock, the door swung open. Rowan stood there, her dark hair tied up in a messy bun, her expression sharp but concerned. Her gaze flicked between Jasper and Livia, taking in the way Livia's hoodie swallowed her frame, the way she kept her arms close to herself, the dark circles under her eyes. She didn't ask questions. "Come in," Rowan said simply, stepping aside. Livia hesitated for a second before stepping over the threshold. Jasper followed, closing the door behind them. For the first time in a long time, Livia was somewhere safe. But safety was only the first step. Healing was going to take much longer. Livia wasn't used to silence. Real silence, the kind that didn't come with the distant echo of shouting voices, with doors slamming, with the suffocating weight of waiting for something bad to happen. At Rowan's apartment, the silence was different. It was warm, calm, filled only with the occasional sound of a clock ticking or the low hum of a TV in the background. She didn't know what to do with it. Jasper had stayed the first night, sleeping on the couch while Rowan set up a makeshift bed for Livia in the spare room. He had been the one to sit beside her when she woke up gasping from nightmares, the one to hand her a bottle of water without saying a word. But by morning, he had to leave, go back home, go back to the life he had put on pause to save her. Rowan was different from Jasper. She was tough, blunt, but not unkind. She didn't smother Livia with questions or force her to talk. Instead, she just existed near her, as if silently letting her know that she wasn't alone. On the third day, Livia found herself sitting at Rowan's small kitchen table, staring at a plate of food she hadn't touched. Rowan sat across from her, sipping coffee. "You don't eat much, huh?" Livia tensed. She knew the question was coming. She just didn't expect Rowan to sound so casual about it. "I'm not really hungry," she murmured. Rowan shrugged. "Okay. But I'm making dinner later, and I expect you to at least try it. I don't waste food." Livia blinked, a little thrown off by the lack of pity in her tone. She was used to people looking at her like she was breakable, like she was something fragile to tiptoe around. But Rowan just talked to her like a person. A normal person. Livia didn't know how to handle that. That night, she sat at the table again, a bowl of homemade pasta in front of her. The smell was warm, rich, nothing like the half-spoiled food she used to sneak from her kitchen when no one was looking. Jasper had come over, sitting beside her with an easy familiarity that made her stomach twist. He had always been that way, casual, effortless, as if saving her life had been just another thing on his to-do list. Livia picked up her fork, twirling it in the pasta. She didn't remember the last time she ate a home-cooked meal. She took a small bite. Rowan, across the table, didn't react, just kept talking to Jasper about some dumb thing their dad had done that week. Like it was normal. Like she hadn't just watched Livia take the first real bite of food she'd had in days. For some reason, that made Livia want to cry. She kept eating instead. A week passed. Then another. Livia didn't go outside. She didn't answer Jasper's texts right away, even though she knew he was probably waiting for some kind of sign that she was okay. She didn't know how to tell him that okay wasn't something she knew how to be. But she was trying. One night, she sat on the couch, wrapped in one of Rowan's oversized blankets, staring at the TV without really watching it. Jasper was next to her, stretched out, one arm draped over the back of the couch. He had been coming over almost every day after school, sometimes bringing takeout, sometimes just showing up without a word and sitting with her in comfortable silence. She didn't know how to thank him for that. "You ever gonna tell me what actually happened that night?" Jasper asked, breaking the quiet. Livia stiffened. She had known the question was coming eventually. For a moment, she considered lying. Saying she had just been scared and panicked, that she had overreacted. That nothing really happened. But then she thought about the bruises that had taken days to fade, the way her stepfather's voice had sounded when he told her she'd never make it far. She swallowed hard. "I tried to leave. He caught me." Jasper didn't move, didn't speak. He just let her talk. He said I'd never make it out there. That no one would care if I disappeared." She let out a shaky breath. "And for a while, I thought he was right." Jasper's jaw clenched. He wasn't. Livia turned her head, meeting his gaze. "You're the only one who came looking for me." Jasper exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Well. I made you a promise, didn't I?" She let out a small, breathy laugh. "You actually remembered that?" "Of course I did." Jasper nudged her arm lightly. "You kept the rock, didn't you?" Livia's breath caught. Because she had. She hadn't meant to, but when she packed her things in a panic, shoving everything she could into a backpack, she had found it in the pocket of her old jacket. That tiny pebble from the kindergarten sandbox. Jasper grinned, like he already knew the answer. Told you it was a promise rock. Livia rolled her eyes, but for the first time in a long time, she felt something warm settle in her chest. For the first time, she thought, maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone anymore. The days turned into weeks. Then months. Livia learned how to exist outside of survival mode. At first, it had been overwhelming. Waking up in a bed that wasn't hers but wasn't dangerous either. Eating meals without worrying if she'd have to steal them. Hearing people talk to her, not at her, not about her, but to her. Rowan didn't treat her like a victim. She made her do normal things, help with groceries, pick a movie, learn how to cook something other than microwave noodles. She forced Livia back into a world she had almost forgotten existed. And then there was Jasper. He was always there, never pushing, never asking for more than she could give. He had a way of showing up exactly when she needed him, whether it was with a bag of burgers on a night when she couldn't sleep or just to sit on the couch beside her, quietly flipping through TV channels. He never treated her like she was broken. She didn't know how to thank him for that. One afternoon, after months of hiding, she finally got the courage to ask Rowan if she could get a job. "Are you sure?" Rowan had asked, watching her carefully. Livia nodded. "I need to do something. I need to start living." Rowan had smiled then, proud, maybe. "I know a place that's hiring." And just like that, Livia had her first job. It was a small bookstore on the corner of town, the kind of place where the scent of paper and old wood filled the air. The owner, a kind woman named Denise, didn't ask questions. She just handed Livia an apron and told her to start alphabetizing the shelves. For the first time in her life, Livia felt like she belonged somewhere. One evening, as she walked home from work, she found Jasper waiting outside Rowan's apartment. He was leaning against his truck, hands in his pockets, watching the sky shift into sunset colors. Livia hesitated for a second before walking up to him. "You know, you don't have to keep checking on me." Jasper smirked. "I know. But what if I just like annoying you?" She rolled her eyes but smiled. "You coming to the game Friday?" he asked, tilting his head. Livia blinked. She hadn't been to a football game in years. It was the kind of thing normal kids did, the kind of thing she had never allowed herself to take part in. "I don't know," she admitted. Jasper gave her a pointed look. "Liv, I've seen you take on worse things than a high school football game." She let out a breathy laugh. "That's fair." Jasper nudged her lightly. "Come. Rowan's already going. And you owe me for all the burgers I bought you." Livia shook her head. "That's not how favors work." "It is in my world." He grinned. "One game. That's all I'm asking." She hesitated, but something inside her told her to say yes. "Okay," she finally said. Jasper's grin widened. "Good. I'll pick you up." And just like that, something that had once felt impossible was suddenly real. Livia wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. Friday night came faster than she expected. The stadium was loud, the bleachers packed with students wearing school colors, the smell of popcorn and grass filling the crisp autumn air. Livia stood at the edge of the field, nerves buzzing in her chest. She hadn't been around this many people in years. "You okay?" Rowan asked beside her. Livia took a slow breath. "Yeah. Just, taking it in." Rowan nodded. "It's a lot. But you belong here just as much as anyone else." Livia swallowed hard. She wasn't sure if she believed that yet. But maybe, someday, she would. The game started, and as the crowd erupted, Livia's eyes found Jasper on the field. He looked completely in his element, focused, determined, like this was exactly where he was meant to be. And then, as if he could feel her watching, he turned. For just a second, their eyes met. Jasper didn't smile, didn't wave. He just looked at her like he knew exactly what this moment meant. Livia felt something shift inside her. She wasn't the girl who hid in the shadows anymore. She wasn't the girl who disappeared without anyone noticing. She was here. She was seen. And for the first time in a long time, she believed she had a future. A year later, Jasper stood in the same stadium, but this time, he wasn't wearing a jersey. He was in a suit, standing on the field with a microphone in his hand. The crowd was different, families, friends, and graduates sat in the stands, watching as names were called, as students walked across the stage to accept their diplomas. Jasper had already gotten his. But he had one last thing to say. Livia Salt, he announced, his voice steady, certain. The crowd murmured as Livia hesitated, frozen for a second before standing. She walked across the field, her heart pounding, her cap slipping slightly as the wind caught it. When she reached Jasper, he didn't hand her a diploma. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a tiny, smooth pebble. Livia sucked in a breath. "The Promise Rock," she whispered. Jasper grinned. "Told you I'd keep my promise." Her hands trembled as she took it, closing her fingers around the small, familiar weight. And for the first time, she truly believed it. She had made it. She was free. And she was finally, truly home. This story is about resilience, about finding light even in the darkest places. Livia's journey isn't just about escaping her past, it's about learning to trust, to heal, and to believe in a future she once thought was impossible. Jasper, in many ways, is the embodiment of what real promises mean. He could have walked away, like so many others did. But he didn't. Because sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness, a childhood promise, a simple question, "Are you okay?" can change the course of someone's life. Livia's story reminds us that survival is only the beginning. That healing isn't linear, and that sometimes, the strongest thing a person can do is accept help. And in the end, it's not about being saved. It's about realizing you were always worth saving.